Putting Southern Arizona's economy and education in perspective, how this region compares with others.
It is really geared towards our community and bettering our community, and maybe people that are interested in moving to our community so they can see where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are.
And 2 weeks after the president announced sweeping changes to immigration policy, Arizona joins a lawsuit in protest of the plan.
This is being seen for what it is, which is a political action on the part of the president, rather than a genuine effort to achieve lasting, enduring immigration reform.
This is Arizona Week. Thanks for joining us. We'll get to the latest immigration news in just a moment, but now, a first of a kind in Southern Arizona. If a business wants to relocate or a family wants to move here, how do they locate information about our strengths and weaknesses? Well, now it's all in one place on what's called a map dashboard, measuring action in progress. Here's my interview with Jennifer Pullen, a research economist at the University of Arizona Eller College of Management.
Well, the map dashboard is to bring a common source of information, a trusted source from the University of Arizona, an unbiased source of information to our community to help facilitate conversation about where we are as a community and maybe where we'd like to head. So we have 36 core indicators across 6 main categories. We'll be looking at information on the economy, education, quality of place, health and social well-being, infrastructure, and workforce and demographics. And we will compare Tucson across 38 different geographies. We'll be looking at the U.S., the states, the metropolitan areas, and the Arizona counties.
So if a business and industry wants to relocate to Southern Arizona, they would log on to this website and take a look at what the school system looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they could. I mean, we have a very wide range of indicators. You know, we look at everything from student achievement to number of bicycle miles that are in a city. So yeah, they could get a really good snapshot of kind of where we stand compared to other select metropolitan areas. We are only looking at 12 different metropolitan areas across the western U.S., so it's not a full comparison across the entire U.S. But yeah, you could get an idea how we compare to Phoenix or how we compare to Portland or Salt Lake City.
Do you run the risk in this map dashboard of maybe discouraging or shining a light on an area that we might be weak in this region?
I mean, there's always that possibility, but that we're here to highlight both the good and the bad. So we need to know where we stand, both, you know, the negative aspects of where we stand in terms of things like poverty rate or median household income, so that we can improve. If we don't know where we're starting, how do we improve? As
your website says, the information has always been there, the data is there, but it's never really been in one central portal. So I'm assuming the idea is that someone just comes to this one place and they really have a one-stop shop for their answers.
Right, exactly, and that's the kind of the goal behind it, just this source of information where somebody can go and they can find out anything from poverty rate to housing cost burden to employment shares by industry, which would give you kind of what is your industrial mix for a region and how that's changing over time, or gross domestic product by your industries. You can go to one place and get all of this information. Before, you had to go and dig through many websites, and it's tedious, and most people don't want to do that. So here we're providing a resource to our community.
In your research, you've seen that this is important, this is critical, and it may lure businesses to this region.
Yeah, it definitely has that possibility. I think from our perspective, the goal is really giving our community a starting point for conversation and a starting point to help maybe just to facilitate that conversation. It's not really necessarily geared towards those businesses because they look at a lot of other factors other than what would be on the dashboard, but it is really geared towards our community and bettering our community, and maybe people that are interested in moving to our community so they can see where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm. It launches this weekend, so it now becomes active, but this has been maybe a year or so in the works. Mm-hmm. How quickly do you expect that you'll start to see some results or some return on your investment?
Oh, we hope it happens very quickly. We're looking for feedback from our community, from our users on how the 36 core indicators that we've included are working for them. And then additionally, we have feature indicators. We're going to be updating the site continually. So we'll be putting up new data, special features. We'll have special features on the southern Arizona cities. So the 25 most populous southern Arizona cities will be included in the dashboard, and we'll have a special feature every month on those. So we're really looking for feedback from our community and how they're using it and what else they would like to see in it.
Is this map dashboard modeled after another program that maybe exists throughout the U.S.?
Well, there's I think 125 other dashboards around the country. We did a pretty detailed industry analysis, and we looked at, the strong points and the weaknesses of each of those other dashboards, and we tried to come up with something that kind of meet in the middle ground. Like we really enjoy looking at these colorful PDFs. I think everybody likes these visual infographic type PDFs that people put out, that cities and companies put out every single year, but they're just one-offs. They don't update. And so other sites, they're just really data intensive and they're boring. They don't have a high impact visualization. So we tried to combine the two. And what we've come up with is, we think, is a very engaging, dynamic website where we have our charts and our graphs, but we also have these very high impact visuals that people will enjoy looking at and people can use in talking about how we're doing and where they'd like to see Tucson head.
As you said, it's user-friendly, maybe not so much for business or industry, but a family who's debating whether or not to relocate to this area can find their answers there.
Yes, exactly. A family that's relocating, they can learn about the different educational aspects of Tucson. They can learn about the quality of life. We have wonderful quality of life here. And so, yeah, there's a wide range of information. So anybody from a business, right, they could start there as a starting point, or a family moving here, or us as a community can really learn about where we truly stand. There's so much misinformation out there, and this is going to be a trusted source for our community, an unbiased source. We provide detailed analysis, but we have no agenda behind the data.
Much different news now. This week, Arizona joined 18 other states in a lawsuit challenging President Obama's plan to reform the immigration system. The announcement igniting a firestorm of controversy. Clint Bolick, a constitutional lawyer at the Goldwater Institute in Phoenix, says the president's plan has plenty of hiccups. And Clint Bolick joins us from the Goldwater Institute. He's joining us from Phoenix via our affiliate there, KAET. Clint, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get started with President Obama's immigration plan. A lot of people questioning, is it legal at this point? And by all indications it is, but that's not stopping some states from perhaps saying that it's not?
Well, I don't think that it's legal, unfortunately, and I'm a passionate supporter of immigration reform. I think this is an unfortunate setback for the long-term agenda. The Constitution gives the president no power whatsoever over immigration. And so he is bound by the laws that Congress has passed. And I think that this action exceeds and changes the laws under which he is purporting to act. So I would agree with a liberal publication, the Washington Post, that just editorialized that this goes far beyond his lawful powers, unfortunately.
So how far will this actually go? We are hearing reports of some states looking at some legal ramifications. Will this come to fruition like he thinks it will?
Well, I think that in the short term it will, and one of the unfortunate aspects of this executive action is that it leaves people who came here illegally in a state of suspended animation. They know that this president, does not intend to deport them, but they have no idea what the next president will do or what a court will do. The proper way to go about immigration reform, the only way these people can feel safe and secure and become a permanent part of the American family, is through congressional action. And unfortunately, the president circumvented that.
Now, you co-authored a book with former Florida Governor Jeb Bush about immigration. Some people are saying this is a very fair attempt by the president. Others, I'm assuming you would agree, are saying that it is not fair. So what is your perception of it right now?
Well, to the extent that it brings people out of the shadows, allows them to work, that's a wonderful thing. But unfortunately, it really does leave people in a state of limbo. And not only that, it really polarizes the American people. The polls that have come out on this show that a majority of Americans agree with the policy, but disagree with the president doing it by unilateral action. We need congressional action. Governor Bush and I have been urging Republicans to come forward with immigration reform since we wrote our book nearly 2 years ago. This is a huge setback for that prospect.
There are reports that this is considered amnesty. You've been researching this idea for some time now. Why is it or why isn't it? What's the argument there?
I don't think that it is amnesty, and in that regard, I probably part company with a lot of my fellow conservatives. I think that amnesty is when you commit an illegal act and pay no consequences whatsoever. The president has instituted, and this is one of the areas where I think he's exceeded his authority, but he has instituted a series of penalties, short, of course, of deportation, but fines and so forth. So I don't think it's correct to call this amnesty, but it does continue to send a signal that the best way to come to the United States is illegally. We've got to have a system of immigration where it is easier and better to come legally than to come illegally.
Now, the president made it very clear in his remarks that we heard last month that this is for people who have been in the United States, not for those who think they can come now and fall under this category. That being said, what does this action, this plan, mean for the future of immigration and immigration policy of the U.S.?
Well, I think that we are on the verge of enacting comprehensive immigration reform that will not just deal with the people who did come illegally, but fixing a system in which too few people with great skills or who are willing to work are allowed to come legally. Right now, for people who can't squeeze into the limited number of work visas or who have relatives here, there really is no way to come into this country legally, and we've got to fix that. We've got to fix a system that's been horribly broken for a long time. By acting alone, the president really set back that effort. It has to be a bipartisan effort, and I'm hoping still that Republicans will come forward with a comprehensive immigration reform, notwithstanding the fact that the president has really poked a stick in their eye.
Should the president have waited? We're hearing a lot of critics say that he should have waited for the Congress to actually get together and act on this. But then there are his supporters who will say Congress hasn't acted for so long and it was time.
Well, we have not had a Republican Congress. This Congress was just elected, but it hasn't even been sworn in. If I had been the president, I would have warned that within 6 months, if Congress failed to act, I would do something like this, but give them a chance to act. And unfortunately, I think this is being seen for what it is, which is a political action on the part of the president, rather than a genuine effort to achieve lasting, enduring immigration reform.
Okay, Clint Bolick joining us from the Goldwater Institute in Phoenix. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Arizona is in the eye of the storm when it comes to the immigration debate, and it has been for decades. So historically, how is the discussion perceived in Mexico, and how will this discussion be written in the history books? Here's my interview with Juan Garcia, a professor in the Department of History at the University of Arizona. What is the perception in Mexico of the U.S. immigration policy, whether it be legal or illegal?
The Mexican people themselves have a very healthy skepticism about immigration policy in the United States, mainly because over the years there's been a contradiction of that policy. Whenever Mexican labor has been in high demand, the enforcement, the regulations, the laws are pretty much ignored. When there are economic problems here in the United States or international tensions affecting the United States, then anti-Mexican sentiments tend to rise dramatically. And oftentimes what's driving the Mexican people when they're thinking about immigration policy is not the policy itself, but what are their needs? They are desperate to put food on the table for their families, to find a secure life. And so those become sort of the paramount issues. The Mexican government officially criticizes the United States for its inconsistent policies and for its mistreatment of Mexican nationals in this country. But privately, Mexico encourages the immigration of its citizens, especially when Mexico is undergoing civil unrest or economic hard times. What many people sometimes don't understand is that the amount of money that's sent back by Mexicans working in the United States makes up a large amount of Mexico's national income. And in fact, that money goes directly into the pockets of the neediest people. So it behooves Mexico to keep those remittances coming.
So we have this attempt at immigration reform. We've had it in the past before. Does this change the idea of what Mexicans are thinking about the U.S.?
No, because, for example, one of the criticisms about the current issue with immigration is that this rewards the lawbreakers, the line jumpers, that it's kind of a backdoor kind of amnesty. Well, with the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, amnesty was granted to 2.3 million Mexicans who were here without documents. So for the Mexicans observing this, they're saying, we're sort of this political football. And promises are made that there's going to be immigration reform, but oftentimes that reform has really worked against Mexican immigrants, not so much helped them, but really made life more difficult for them.
You mentioned 1986. Here we are in 2014. So how did we get to this point? Why hasn't the situation been fixed? You say it's political.
Yeah. Well, Douglas Massey, a Princeton professor who is an expert in immigration, I think makes a good point when he argues that the beginning of this immigration problem in terms of illegal immigration began in 1986. Because in addition to granting amnesty to 2.3 million Mexicans, the bill also contained a large infusion of funds for patrolling the border. And he argues, and I agree with him, that that's when the militarization of the border began. And he cites a very interesting statistic. He said, when you look at immigration in 1980 from Mexico that was undocumented, more than 46% of those who entered the United States went back. And so there wasn't a growing population of immigrants who were here illegally. But he said if you look at 2007, less than 7% of those who have entered illegally have returned to Mexico. Wow. And he argues that the militarization of the border has not only made it more difficult, more dangerous, and more expensive to cross the border, but once Mexicans arrive in the United States, they're not going to go back. Because of those very issues. So it's really kind of the border, instead of keeping Mexicans out of the United States, the militarized border has kept Mexicans in the United States and has in some ways aggravated the problem of undocumented immigrants in this country.
Interesting. Now, though you study history, and we can't write the history books for the future just yet, how will this be remembered 10 years from now, 20, 50 years from now?
Well, if the pattern follows through, when you read the history of immigration in other periods, for example, when the United States attempted to reduce and succeeded in reducing the immigration from Eastern and Southern Europe, for example, or when we look at the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 that barred Chinese immigration in the United States, or the Gentleman's Agreement in 1907, which targeted Japanese, most historians have written about those periods in very unflattering terms. They have criticized the United States, if you will, for being not only intolerant, but short-sighted. And in fact, they argued that in retrospect, when you look at those immigrants who we tried to exclude, really were not the danger that they had been portrayed as being, that in many ways they contributed greatly to the growth and development and enrichment of American society. So if we're looking at this issue 50 years from now, I think that the trend among historians is going to be to look at it the same way, that policy was not motivated by American ideals or humanitarian concerns or real interest in resolving the issue or addressing it, but rather as an attempt to find scapegoats or as political infighting that simply exacerbated the issue of what to do about immigration in this country.
This is about more than politics or policy to you, in other words.
What I try to emphasize when I talk about immigration, and it's a very volatile, controversial subject. It's like the weather. Everybody knows something about it, and everybody has an opinion about it, but nobody has a solution toward it. And what I try to tell people is that, we're not dealing with statistics or criminals. We're dealing with human beings. And that we often in the debate overlook the humanitarian aspect of it. And that, if you look at our immigration policy, if the original English colonists had to meet the requirements that current colonists now, or immigrants have to meet now, they would have never been able to get off the ships. And so immigration has been central to American history. There have been countless studies and examples of how immigration has benefited this country dramatically, and yet we continue to see immigration in a very negative light. And part of that is that it leads us to look at these individuals not as human beings, but as problems to be resolved or problems to be overlooked.
The Buzz now with my colleague here at Arizona Public Media, Ted Robbins. And Ted, thanks so much for joining me. Let's start off with Arizona has joined the other states with this lawsuit, but Congress also really talking about this matter.
Right. The lawsuit, as it used to be, it's probably still said by law, anybody can sue anybody for anything, right? This particular lawsuit is coming from largely Republican states, okay. And it's making the argument that the president overstepped his constitutional bounds and that this is going to create or exacerbate a crisis at the border, and in other words, cause more illegal immigration. So that's got to work its way through the federal courts. The real action, as you said, is in Congress.
And it's normally a pretty quiet time in Congress before the holiday, but we're talking a lot about immigration. What are they saying?
Well, what Congress did this week was pass. The big question is avoiding a government shutdown in mid-December. And as you may recall, last October of 2013, the government did shut down for 11 days, largely in an attempt to dismantle Obamacare. This year, the issue is immigration. Okay. And I don't think there's political will to really let the government shut down again. I mean, it was not a popular move last year as it ended up, and the Republicans didn't win. So what they did was said, we will pass, this is just making its way through. As we talk, it's not yet been done. Mm-hmm. The leadership gave them an opportunity, them being essentially the Tea Party caucus of the House, mm-hmm. an opportunity to vote to condemn the president's immigration action, but it was largely a symbolic vote. It doesn't carry much weight. The next thing was funding the government. And so what they have been talking about doing was let the government go forward, let government be funded, except for the Department of Homeland Security, which of course is responsible for border security and immigration processing. And that is on a sort of a short leash. They would fund it as it's going, as we're talking now. This hasn't passed yet, but they would only fund that until March.
Okay, and it doesn't come from the same pool of money that we talked about last year.
Well, you're sort of holding the whole. I mean, it's an enormous. It's the second largest cabinet department. I mean, it's something like 20 agencies under DHS. Congress has the purse strings, so they can fund or defund things. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's interesting is that USCIS, which is U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, part of DHS, mm-hmm. Administers the DACA program, the Deferred Action Program. That's paid for through fees, through the applicants have to pay for their permits. So Congress doesn't have any control over those purse strings. So that's one aspect of it. But if you hold up all of DHS and all of, let's say, the Border Patrol's mm-hmm. And ICE's funding, you're gonna be able to have some impact.
So it won't be a popular move, as you said. It carries a lot of risk.
Well, it carries a lot of political risk, but remember that, as we've been talking about, the Republicans take control of the Senate in January. So I think the thought is there that if you keep DHS on a short timing leash, then after the new Congress is in, you can sort of revisit this and push a little harder against the president.
And now immigration, fixing the issue is nothing new. We saw this back in the late 80s, early 90s. What's different this time around? Is it just perception of?
Well, I think this is just me talking. I mean, I think the people were more compassionate then about people coming over the border looking for a better life. I think that a lot of, well, then there was in fact a surge, and as a result of that, again, conservatives, especially in the Republican Party, see that 1986 law as a failure. And that's the one thing that they disagree with President Reagan on. He was the force behind that 86 amnesty, and back then amnesty was not a dirty word. Right. So that's what I think is different. But nobody disagrees that the immigration system is broken.
And we've heard a couple of the people in the program, tonight's program, talk about this being a political football. They say the system is broken. But we should note that deportations are up, illegal immigration to the country is down.
Right.
So how far does that really carry in this argument?
It doesn't seem to be carrying much. I mean, there's the issue of border security. So when you don't actually quantify that, when you don't actually make a hard and fast definition of that, it's a moving target, which the president has long said, and frankly, so has the Senate. I mean, remember, last year the Senate voted for a comprehensive immigration bill, and the House didn't. So if something's broken and it needs to be fixed, who fixes it? And this is where you get to the political argument, is that the president says, well, it's ultimately up to Congress to fix, but the president says Congress isn't fixing it. And that's true. And Congress says, hey, it's up to us to fix, and we need to take it piece by piece, is what the House says, rather than comprehensively.
Okay, and as we know, now a Republican Congress who says give us a chance, but we may or may not see that coming up this year. All right, Ted Robbins from Arizona Public Media, thank you for your analysis, and thank you for joining us. That's our program. For all of us here at Arizona Week, I'm Lorraine Rivera.